I grew up in a home that wasn't exactly traditional. My father remarried when I was just 10 years old. My stepmother, Claire, was an elegant woman, charming, graceful, and effortlessly managing our home with a smile. At first, I didn't mind having her around. In fact, there was a time when I welcomed the change, the idea of having a new mother figure. But as the years passed, things shifted. She had a way of making everything seem perfect on the surface, as though nothing could ever go wrong. Yet I knew there was more beneath the facade, though I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was. Claire was the kind of person who thrived on being in control. Whether it was managing the household chores or organizing family gatherings, she was always at the center of it all. My father adored her. His admiration for her was obvious, almost too obvious. They were the perfect couple in public, at least. But behind closed doors, things were different. It wasn't anything overt, no shouting matches or visible tension. Instead, there was a quiet distance that seemed to grow with each passing day. I found myself watching her more closely over the years. It started with little things, small, almost imperceptible changes. Her laugh would sometimes sound forced, like she was trying too hard to convince herself and others that everything was fine. There was a restlessness about her, especially when she was alone. I'd often catch her staring out the window, lost in thought, her expression distant and cold, as though she were somewhere else entirely. It made me uncomfortable, like there was a secret she wasn't sharing. And it wasn't just her. The house, too, felt different, empty in a way that it hadn't been before. Then there was the cat. I had never been fond of animals, but we had adopted a cat shortly after Claire moved in. He was a sleek, black cat, with piercing green eyes that seemed to watch everything. He was an odd creature, more distant than most cats I'd encountered. There was something almost unnerving about him. He wasn't the kind of pet that sought affection. He simply observed, always lurking in the background, never really engaging with anyone. At first, it didn't seem unusual. Animals are like that sometimes. But as time went on, I began to notice how Claire interacted with him. She'd often talk to him in hushed tones, sometimes apologizing to him as though he understood her in a way no one else could. The cat seemed to follow her everywhere, and there was something intimate about the way they communicated, something beyond the typical bond between a pet and its owner. I couldn't help but feel that there was more going on between them than I could see. It was as if the cat knew something that the rest of us didn't. He was a silent witness, a part of the house, just like Claire, seemingly perfect, yet hiding something deep beneath. Over time, I started to wonder if Claire was really as perfect as everyone made her out to be. There were days when she'd disappear for hours, and no one would question it. She'd return with a smile, as if nothing had happened, but I could see the shift in her demeanor. It was subtle, but it was there. And the cat, he seemed to react to these changes too, as though he could sense the shift in the atmosphere. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew something was wrong. I started feeling like an outsider in my own home. My father, oblivious to the growing tension, remained completely enamored by her. He didn't see the small cracks in their relationship. Or maybe he chose not to. It was clear that something was off, though. And as much as I tried to ignore it, the feeling only grew stronger. There was a barrier between us that hadn't been there before, a quiet distance that settled in the space between us. I would catch Claire in moments of reflection, when her guard would slip, and I would see something vulnerable in her eyes. It was a fleeting moment, but it left a lingering sense of unease. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to change, and that the perfect life she had created was starting to unravel. I just didn't know how, or when, or why. But the cat, always present, seemed to be the only one who truly understood. The first signs that something wasn't right came slowly, like the subtle shift in the air before a storm. I remember the first time I heard her on the phone late at night. It wasn't unusual for Claire to be on the phone, but this call was different. It was hushed, almost desperate. I couldn't make out the words, but her tone was sharp, intense, like she was trying to keep something hidden. I told myself it was nothing, that maybe she was talking to a friend or handling something personal. But the next night, it happened again. This time, I heard her voice clearly, though it wasn't directed at me. It was like she was speaking to someone who wasn't supposed to be in the room. The words were muffled, but the tension in her voice was undeniable. There was something forbidden in it, something that didn't belong. She'd hang up quickly when she realized I was near, her face quickly shifting to one of forced cheerfulness. I wasn't sure what to make of it, but the feeling of unease kept growing. It wasn't just the phone calls. It was the way she started acting when my father wasn't around. She'd often be late coming home from errands, or she'd vanish into her room for hours. When she did emerge, she always looked a little too composed, a little too perfect. I noticed she was taking extra care with her appearance, wearing clothes she hadn't worn in a while, looking flawless in a way that felt unnatural for a woman who used to just throw on casual attire around the house. The cat, too, became more agitated during these times. He would follow her from room to room, but instead of lying lazily on the couch like he normally did, he was constantly moving, pacing around her, staring at her with those unnerving green eyes. It was as if the cat knew something I didn't, knew something none of us were supposed to know. I started to pay attention to the little things. The way Claire seemed to avoid looking me in the eye when we passed each other, the way she started taking longer walks outside, telling my father she needed some fresh air. It felt like she was hiding something, slipping further away with each passing day. One afternoon, I was sitting in the living room, reading a book, when I overheard her talking to someone on the phone again. This time, I heard a name, one I didn't recognize. She was speaking in a tone I had never heard before, soft and flirtatious, the kind of tone you use when you're trying to keep something secret. The conversation was brief, but the underlying tension in her words was unmistakable. I didn't know who this person was, but I knew it wasn't my father. The realization hit me hard. I couldn't believe it, but at the same time, everything started to fall into place. The late-night calls, the strange behavior, the distance between us, it all pointed in one direction. I couldn't confront her. Not yet. I didn't want to believe it, and I wasn't sure I had the right to intrude on her personal life. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I began to watch her more closely, noticing the way her eyes would wander when she thought no one was looking, or how her hand would tremble slightly when she held a glass of water. There were small, unspoken moments where I could see the facade slip, but they were brief, and they left me questioning everything I thought I knew. The cat, too, seemed to reflect T. One evening, everything changed. I had been sitting in my room, trying to focus on homework, when I heard Claire's voice again. This time, it wasn't just a hushed conversation or a phone call. I could hear her speaking loudly, her tone sharp, as if she was arguing with someone. I didn't move immediately, I couldn't. My heart raced in my chest as I tried to make sense of what I was hearing. The words were unclear, but the anger in her voice was unmistakable. It wasn't just a disagreement. It felt deeper, more urgent. I hesitated, not wanting to invade her privacy, but the need to know the truth grew overwhelming. I quietly made my way to the hallway, trying to avoid making any noise. As I approached the living room, I caught a glimpse of Claire's phone on the coffee table. Her screen was lit up, and for the first time, I saw the name on the display. David. The name didn't ring a bell, but the realization hit me like a slap in the face. I knew then that something was terribly wrong. She wasn't arguing with my father. She was arguing with someone else, someone I didn't know, someone who had a hold over her. I stood there, frozen for a moment, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do. I could feel the weight of the secret pressing down on me, and everything I thought I understood about my family started to unravel. I had never expected this. The image of my stepmother, the poised, perfect woman I had always admired, was shattered in an instant. The cat, who had been lying motionless on the couch, suddenly stood up and walked toward the door. He didn't look at me, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was somehow leading me toward the truth. I moved closer, my steps quiet but purposeful. As I reached the coffee table, I glanced at Claire's phone. She had left it unlocked. I knew I shouldn't look. Part of me still wanted to respect her privacy, to pretend I hadn't heard what I had, but my hand moved instinctively. I picked up the phone and, against my better judgment, opened her messages. My heart skipped a beat as I scrolled through the conversations, each message confirming the worst of my fears. There, in black and white, was a string of messages between Claire and David. The tone was intimate, flirtatious, the kind of exchange I'd never imagined my stepmother could have with anyone outside of our family. They were planning to meet, discussing where and when. The final message I saw made my stomach drop. "I'll see you tonight. I can't wait." I felt like the ground beneath me had shifted, like everything I thought I knew had been ripped away. The betrayal was suffocating, overwhelming. My thoughts raced. How could she do this? How could she hide something like this from everyone, especially my father? And how had I been so blind to the signs? I heard the front door open, and the sound of footsteps followed. Panic set in as I quickly placed the phone back on the table, just as Claire entered the room. She didn't seem to notice anything amiss at first. But when she looked at me, I saw a flicker of recognition in her eyes, something I had never seen before. It wasn't guilt or shame, but it was something far more unsettling. It was as if she knew, somehow, that I had discovered the truth. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice steady, but laced with a tension I hadn't noticed before. I couldn't answer. I couldn't find the words. Everything I wanted to say felt trapped inside, suffocating me. The silence between us grew unbearable. She didn't press further. She just stood there, waiting for me to say something, anything. But what could I say? How could I confront her about this? The minutes stretched on, but neither of us spoke. I wasn't sure what was happening, whether she was waiting for me to say something or if she was too afraid to break the silence herself. All I could think about was the cat, who had returned and was now sitting quietly in the corner, watching us both, as though he understood everything. I was consumed by the knowledge of what I had just uncovered. There was no turning back now. The days that followed were a blur. I couldn't look at Claire the same way anymore, nor could I pretend that everything was fine. It felt like the house itself had changed. Every room, every corner, every object seemed to echo with the weight of the secret I now carried. I couldn't escape it. It followed me in my thoughts, in the quiet moments when everything should have been normal. But it wasn't, and I didn't know how to process it. How do you reconcile the image of a woman you trusted with the reality of what you now knew? Claire tried to act as though nothing had happened. She would smile at me in passing, ask if I needed anything, offer the same words of encouragement she always had. But it felt hollow. Every time she spoke, I could hear the lie beneath her words, the truth she was hiding from my father, from me, from everyone. She carried on with her life as if the betrayal wasn't sitting heavy between us, suffocating the air around us. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was living in a house of mirrors, where nothing was real anymore. My father, oblivious as always, continued to dote on her. It was painful to watch. He had no idea. He still believed that their marriage was everything he'd hoped for, that she was the woman he had fallen in love with years ago. I couldn't bring myself to tell him, to shatter his world like that. What would it do to him? Would he even believe me? The trust between us felt fractured, and every time I saw him look at her with those adoring eyes, I felt like I was betraying him too. I thought about confronting Claire, demanding the truth, but I wasn't sure if I was ready to hear it. What if she denied everything? What if she justified it? Part of me feared that I would be the one left in the wrong, that I would somehow be blamed for the collapse of the family I had known. But another part of me knew that I couldn't continue living this lie, pretending that everything was okay when it clearly wasn't. I wasn't sure what to do, but I knew I couldn't stay silent forever. The cat, ever present, continued to watch. He was no longer just an animal in the house. He had become a symbol of everything that had gone wrong. There was something about his eyes, the way he followed Claire wherever she went, that felt almost predatory. It was as if he knew, like he understood the gravity of the situation. Sometimes, I would catch him staring at me, his gaze unblinking, almost as though he was silently waiting for me to make a move, to do something about the tension that hung between us. It was a strange comfort, and a disturbing reminder that nothing was the way it should be. The weeks passed, and I started to lose track of time. I went through the motions, school, meals, empty conversations, but I couldn't focus. I felt disconnected from everything, as though I were watching my life from the outside. Claire had B.